This is Changing Channels with Larry Walsh, the Channelnomics podcast that connects you with channel chiefs, thought leaders, and executives about what it takes to get the next generation of tech to market. Here's your host, Larry Walsh, the CEO and Chief Analyst of Channelnomics.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining again. As I said, I'm Larry Walsh, your host, and we've got a great episode for you today. I guess the best way I can describe what we're going to be doing today is talking about this ongoing theme of change. There's a lot of change coming at everyone, and the speed of challenges and opportunities is just accelerating. So how do we manage change effectively is a theme that we're going to be returning to a few times. From my perspective, I can tell you, I think the best way of dealing with change is having or being armed with a ample amount of information. And that's one of the things I wanted to just start off by mentioning is that information is one of the things that we do here at Channelnomics. And we've recently released our annual Channel Chief Outlook and our Channel Forecast. And these are our annual measures of what happened in the previous year on the channel and what we see going forward. A few things to just take note of is that there's a lot of good news despite everything and all the jokes we could tell about 2020 being it's the worst year ever, which I would say worst year ever yet. But truth is that if you look at the data that we've generated, is that it's a lot of good news. The channel chiefs and the channel professionals out there, they see a lot of optimism. And in fact, data would show if we didn't know there was a pandemic and all the economic disruption, you wouldn't even know by looking at the data anything happened. That's the level of optimism that's coming out, although there's a bit of caution in it. Good news is channel budgets are increasing, so more money being invested in sales and marketing and enablement. A lot of interest in automation, a lot of interest in driving more interest in marketing and driving more marketing resources. And the partners in particular, have to say, partners are returning to a more optimistic footing. However, we can tell you is that they did feel the impact of 2020 heavily. There's a lot in these reports, so please go to channelnomics.com, check them out. You can find them all there. And we're going to talk about a bit more about some of this and the theme of things that have changed with our guest today, joining us from San Francisco, my friend, my colleague, Meaghan Sullivan, the Global VP of Ecosystem Marketing at SAP. Meaghan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to be here again.
You know, I should preface our conversation by saying is that you and I started this conversation almost a year ago as we were going into the pandemic, right? And so it's again, thrilled to have you back to talk about not so much, we did learn some lessons, but also things that we are going to be taking forward. I do want to ask one thing though to start off. You are joining us from San Francisco. Is there anyone left there? And did you miss out on the exodus?
There are a lot of companies that have left San Francisco. I might be the only one left, but parking is so much easier now. So it's all good.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking forward to no traffic. That will be a nice change in San Francisco. But you've also had been through a fair amount of change since we last did this. In fact, I believe, Ed, could we pull up an image of part of this change in Meaghan's life? Oh, there it is. So who is this fine young gentleman?
Well, this fine young gentleman is my COVID baby. He's Ashton, and it had him literally in the middle of the pandemic. So, the pandemic and COVID actually brought a lot of blessings and happiness for me. So, talk about change. I've been in the midst of all of it, but lots of good things happened last year too, personally, anyways.
That's amazing. That must have been a really interesting transition of going through, because I remember you were pregnant last spring going into this, and then you had to manage all the disruptions while going through the maternity process. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was an interesting time, but I guess if you have to be in lockdown, you might as well do it with something super cute like that, right?
And just talking about some of this change a little bit, I also hear that you've taken up a new hobby.
I have taken up cycling in all of this. So I like to get out and ride my bike all around the Golden Gate Bridge and through the Presidio and the headlands, and it's been fantastic.
You know, my favorite part of biking the Golden Gate Bridge is the downhill ride in the Sausalito.
Well,
I
yes, that is
Yeah,
epic.
it epic is a really good way. I was gonna say, oh wait, we can't use profanity on here. So I was gonna say scared. We'll leave the other part out, right? It is truly a little nerve-wracking the first time you do it. You know, I don't mean to labor this entire line about change, but we are talking about, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you back, is because you and I had a really uh, thoughtful is one way of describing it, but it was almost scary too. The last time we had this conversation about change, in that we were going into the lockdowns last March and April. We really didn't know what was going to happen. And you were the first one to step up and say, they're taking away our favorite weapons, face-to-face meetings and events.
Mhm.
So why don't we just start there? Um, and in fact, before we do that, I do want to, Ed, if we could bring up one more thing, because I do want to show this, because speaking of, because this was a fun time you and I did have. Remember, this is
That
us
might
in
have been the
Napa.
last face-to-face event that I was at with you.
Yeah, so it may have been just that this one we did a wine tasting event in Napa with our partners, 360 Insight and Stephen Kellum. Um, but I do, we were lamenting about that, is
Yes.
that we're not going to be able to do that. So what comes after that? What did you learn? Did those fears materialize? Did those losing those weapons, did you feel them?
Well, it's interesting, Larry. I was trying to think last time we talked, and I believe it was in March. I mean, it was right when this
Yeah,
hit.
yeah, it
And
was.
all of the companies were making the big decisions about canceling their big events. And SAP had not yet pulled the trigger on canceling Sapphire, but we kind of knew that was coming. But it was a very interesting time of transformation, kind of as a marketing organization, because those events drive so much revenue and an opportunity for us to get with customers and do demand gen. And it was very scary going into that, saying, okay, how are we going to fill that pipeline with the absence of all that, the face-to-face event. So it's been a huge transformation. We've learned a lot in the last 12 months, as I'm sure, the entire industry has. But so many good things too has come out of the change too, I believe, in forcing that digital transformation to go faster than it would have, originally gone. So, all
So
silver linings, right?
yeah, well, I mean, look, it's worth noting though, because as we discussed, and you weren't the only ones. There was a lot out there, a lot of people out there that were going, well, how are we going to keep? In fact, you were the first one to say it to me, which was, how are we going to keep the pipeline full
Yeah.
if we're not able to touch people? If
Mhm.
we're not able to reach, okay, I shouldn't say touch people. I mean, reach out to people, be able to have that human connection. How did you maintain that connection? How did SAP and its partners manage that transition?
So I would say it was like a multi-touch, if we want to stay on that theme. It was a multi-engagement model of how we do that. Some of it was, virtual events, pre-taped on demand. Other was live streaming. There was a trend for a while there, as you recall, of, bring on a celebrity, an entertainment person for, 15 minutes and have them, entertain their audience. We saw our partners get super creative in what they were doing with kind of live events or engagement models out in the field as well. So I think we learned a lot through it. Some worked, some didn't, but really interesting to see so many different types of things going on.
Okay, so let's tag on that, because I really like to hear what didn't work, because I saw a lot over the last 12 months, a lot of experimentation, a lot of uncomfortable people.
Yes.
So what didn't work?
Well, I'd say, trying to take a 1 or 2 day meeting that was, our huge tech conference, and, for any company, by the way, this just isn't SAP specific, but I saw a lot of companies try and take big, long conferences and do the same thing online, like a whole day conference or whole 2 days online. That doesn't work. Content was king, engagement was king. How do you get more exciting? How do you hold your audience? And I think what wasn't working just as an industry is so much of our audience, they're going to a lot of tech conferences, a lot of vendor conferences, and all of us competing for their time at the same time with kind of the
Yeah.
same models and everything. That was tough, right? So the companies that could get the most creative with the best engagement were the ones that kind of won in that model.
Yeah, I remember during one, like, I think it was a 3-day virtual event, I had like 5 strangers come to my house and smoke in the living room so I could remember what it's like to walk through a Vegas casino. I mean, you have
I
to have the
love it.
full experience. So,
Absolutely.
it is amazing though that there was we did learn that we don't have to replicate our previous reality.
Right.
That's one of the things that, and I think that we've gotten to the point of we've calling it Zoom fatigue, but
Right.
is it really Zoom fatigue as much as we have to adjust ourselves, right?
But I think in the other extreme, a lot of companies benefited in T&E expenses, right? So now you cut travel and entertainment. Those are big ticket items, especially for the really large companies, right? And is that travel all really necessary? Do people really need to, does 100% of your staff need to be in the office? Do you always have to have in-person events? I think we learned the answer was no. And there's a balance of those two. So a lot of cost savings in one side, that vents in cost saving. And so how do you put those into kind of more meaningful investments?
So since you brought it up, I'm curious about this. Since you do run events, or you have run events, and until recently, and you will again eventually, I'm sure. How do you account for that T&E expense that's not necessarily pegged directly to the event expense? And is it that noticeable? I mean, I'm sure it is somewhere, but do you register it as a marketing professional?
We don't register it kind of in our program dollars because it's a different line item in accounting. But as a company, we can certainly benefit from that, as a whole, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting side conversation that I've been having lately, because people have been coming to us asking about sales capacity and whether or not they need to increase inside sales to compensate for this, and the pushback that they're getting. And I've just had to say to them, I go, of course you're getting pushback, because these people who are used to being on the road, that's their life.
Right.
That's having the company pay for their Michelin dinner.
Right.
That's a pretty big loss for them.
And I have talked to, in fairness, I've talked to a lot of people, especially salespeople and those road warriors. They're having a really hard time not being out there, really engaging and, being stuck in their homes. And I think it's a lot harder than we give it credit for, right? So I want to be sensitive to that too. So there's definitely a good side to, cutting down expenses and doing that, but there is an emotional and a mental health side that's kind of tough too for those people that aren't out there as much anymore. And I recognize that as well.
Yeah. So what do you think, looking forward, because I think we do need to look forward more, is what are we going to continue to doing? Because some are grudgingly accepting this, some are more willingly accepting that we're not going to revert back to a pre-COVID state. It's not everything, and I hate using terms like new normal, um, but they're not, even the new normal is going to look different.
Right.
So, what is it that you see changing permanently, and what's going to be adapted?
Well, I think it's a balance. We're never going to get rid of live events and the need for people to be in person and networking and the value of business transactions that you get, when you're at a conference and being able to engage with people, in the hallways or, in the bars or in between sessions or whatever. I think that is really highly valuable. Customer touch, especially when you have, big deals and big engagements. I think those are also super important to be in person. I think what changes though is that the frequency of those probably changes. I think there is more online and more appetite to have online too, and people are doing a better job with kind of creatively engaging, and that is a way to effectively meet as well. So it's going to be the balance between the two. I think the bigger question becomes when are we able to get in person again? And I've talked to several large tech companies, even small tech companies that are saying not this year even, it might even be next year. So it'll be interesting to see when all that kind of settles in.
Yeah. What do you think, what are you doing to cut through the competition? And I mean by competition, not your market competitors, your product competitors, but the competition for attention.
Yeah.
One of the things we've seen is an explosion in communication, because now we have time, we have people who are individual creators, content creators. There's a lot of messaging going on. What is an effective strategy for cutting through that high signal to noise?
Crisp, fast, nuggets of information, right? Just what they need, snackable content, really
Yeah.
fast. Video is great that they can, watch it another time on demand. I think all of that is great. To your point, though, I think people are just tired of getting called to meetings and having, meetings upon meetings and more Zoom meetings. And even on when we try and do something personal, to engage, whether it's like a virtual wine tasting or get together for a virtual cooking class, people are a little bit tired of that too, to be honest. And I think what people really want is just time back to get off their computers and laptops and actually get some work done. So I think it's a gift of time for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's a partner calling.
It is. I got to do the deal, Larry.
So I hear what you're saying about time, but this is a constant. And one of the things that partners say is that the phone ringing, inbound phone that calls to them from vendors trying to get their attention, it was constant before. It will be constant going forward. How do we, as an industry, moderate that so we can allow the partners to do the things that we need them to do and being effective ambassadors of brands and products?
I mean, you make a great point. It's all going to be about efficiencies. And, to your point, how often do we call? How do we consolidate all those messaging of those topics together and do it less, but more effectively and more efficiently? Because no partner wants to be, or anyone, nobody wants to be bombarded with, meetings from different departments and different people every day, or even the same company with lots of different, areas. So we've got to do a much better job collaborating amongst ourselves and collaborating as an ecosystem to take those messages out, one time versus many.
Yeah. What's your new favorite tool for getting out there? What's the thing that you're using more now and you're planning to continue to use that you didn't have before?
I'd say that there's a lot of work and creativity going on with virtual studios in home and the equipment that we're sending out to our employees so that they can set, the green screen and the lighting and the teleprompter up, in their own homes to be more effective as they communicate out. So we're doing some investments to certain people within the company to have that set up at home, which has been great.
Yeah.
And training, by the way, on, better ways to be virtual and be more engaging and more creative. For sure.
By the way, your virtual background is amazing.
Thank you.
It's simply stunning.
Yeah, my dog might walk by in a minute, so enjoy that.
Do you find it, one of the things that I've noticed, and look, it comes up in Channelnomics research all the time. Partners will say that they want to do more marketing. And no offense to the partner community, but this has historically been one of their weakest areas, that they're not very good at marketing. They're not very consistent at it. But have they tapped into your resources and looked to you more for support? And do you think that is a sustainable trend?
They have. It's been interesting because I think the pandemic has accelerated marketing in some ways for a lot of these partners, where, to your point, it wasn't a big investment or they didn't have a lot of employees before. Now they're either hiring that area and or leveraging our assets or our services to do that. So we've got a lot of offerings where we will, we've got packages where we will send out a home studio to you, to a partner with the cameras and the lighting and the teleprompters and everything so that they can create their own video. We're doing a lot more training now on how to, create, virtual events and virtual podcasts and webinars and things like that. So we are seeing the investments go up in the marketing area to do things like that and around, demand generation and how you do different engagement types now.
Yeah. Do you find that these changes are producing more or better leads or creating more opportunities? Is the customers responsive to all this?
They are, and it's interesting, especially say in the mid-market as an example, I know we've talked about it for years, so it's kind of a tired phrase, but the customer journey and digital marketing, all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of ways that consumers are finding out about products before they even find the partner or the vendor. And so with our partners being able to take on some of these new tactics and tools and ways of doing demand gen, they're actually out there to able to capture consumers much earlier in the process and bring them back in as a lead, where in the past, that customer may never even have heard of, the partner or the vendor for that. So we're seeing a lot more effective, upstream things going on.
That's great to hear, but the reason why I even asked that is because we've been also hearing this push for a while about partners needing to transform their businesses. They need to evolve their capabilities, and it's still one of these areas, marketing and their own conveyance of value propositions, their own capture of new opportunities is always still falling behind. I do want to ask about this because SAP has announced this new initiative, Rise, transformation,
Right.
in which you talk about this new offering, transformation as a service. Before I dive into a little bit behind that, can you tell us a little bit more about what this is, this transformation as a service that you're bringing to customers and partners?
So Rise is a whole new way that SAP is going to be doing business. And you're right, it is about transformation. It's about the ecosystem coming together with SAP and bringing new technologies to market for enterprises to be much more efficient and fully go to cloud. It's exciting for my organization personally because the ecosystem becomes front and center now in the SAP strategy. Never been more important for us to be able to have our reach and the depth and the breadth with that that vast ecosystem. So bright days ahead for us as we roll that out further.
So and this is just I hear different answers to this question, and I'm just curious from your perspective, what makes transformation so difficult? Because it's easy to talk about. We can all witness transformation in the wild. But
Well,
what makes it
yeah.
hard that you need to create something as a service and and try to convince others that that they need to do it or have somebody do it for them?
Well, we go back to the original purpose of this whole podcast, right? Change is
Yeah.
really, really hard, especially, the bigger organization you get, the harder that change is going to be, certainly. New processes, new procedures, new tools, new tactics, new ways of doing things. It takes a while to get that kind of ship moving, in change and direction. So you're absolutely right. Those partners that are more nimble and will jump on that train sooner and they're willing to take bigger risks and go with us on that are going to be the ones out of the gate that will get there faster. And as come on, even as an industry, as we talk about digital transformation and cloud, I mean, remember utility-based computing, back in the day? This has been around for SaaS and SaaS models have been around for a long time. So
Yeah.
this is just the next generation of where we're headed in this journey.
One of the things I was watching the Rise event where all this was being announced, and I thought it was great. SAP's CEO Christian Klein called out the importance of the ecosystem and the partners to this transformation process and driving this change going forward. And in fact, um, Carl Farbach, your chief channel officer, yes. Oh, here he is.
There he is.
Yeah, he talks about this all the time. In the importance of partners to to the SAP community and the SAP value proposition. Tell us a little bit about where do the partners in your ecosystem, not your ISV partners and your technology partners, your resellers, where do they fit into this transformation vision?
So this is all where it becomes very cool, right? So we've got this great set of SAP core products, in the center. Now you take this ecosystem of partners and they lay their IP on top of that and create different technologies for that value add, which is great. The next layer up, now they can take all of their customization, whether they're in country and know all the government regulations, all the localization, and LOB specific, expertise. Our ecosystem is to be able to create, develop, and push products out to market that SAP can't do on our own. And that's where this becomes so powerful in being able to leverage the ecosystem to get out there together.
Yeah. So Meg, I'm going to ask you potentially a loaded question, but what the hell? Do you think, because again, I, I've grown tired even hearing people talk about, transform or die. And it's like,
Yeah.
it becomes almost hyperbolic when you hear it as often as we have. But do you think the experience that we had, over the past year has made this the right time for something like a transformation as a service, this guided journey that you and your partners are going to be taking end customers on?
Well, I believe the last year has certainly accelerated the rate of change and the rate of transformation for sure. And I think people now are going to be, again, more of an appetite to try new things and do things differently than they have in the past. We've been forced to do that. It's been kind of a forcing function over the last 12 months or so. But I do think that so many companies, to your point earlier, have seen the silver linings and the benefits. And as we're kind of climbing out of the ickiness of everything that happened, to your point, there are still a lot of positive things that came out of it. There's a ton of growth. I mean, look at the stock market. It's, maybe that's not a great example because it's inflated kind of beyond reality.
So wait, what you're saying, Meaghan, is that you've been shorting GameStop?
I am not a GameStop person. No. I'm not involved. But wow, is that fascinating or what? I mean, you talk about people taking advantage of a market condition, in an entrepreneurial way to kind of get benefit out of it.
Yeah.
People are doing that, and they're taking advantage of kind of the rate of transformation, the way things are happening, and doing different things and different business models. Maybe that's not the best example, but hey, it's an example of people that are actually, taking advantage of the transformation and the change, and making real things happen from it. So
yeah. So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, because not just what you've changed as a result of 2020, looking at the transformation efforts that SAP is leading. Where do you see this ecosystem of yours over the next 3 to 5 years? What is the impact of all this going to have going forward in terms of the new tools we're learning, the new techniques we're learning? How is the world going to look as a result of this?
So I think the ecosystem definitely looks different 3 to 5 years from now than it does, now. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, Larry, in terms of the role of ISVs and software partners and marketplaces and the way that, we do business and business models and everything else. I think, all of that becomes new and accelerated. I think for SAP, we're going to be bringing on a whole bunch of new partner types. And I think we're going to really be focused on those partners that are willing to go all in with us on that development of IP and different business models and, different products. And, as I said, specializing in their line of businesses. It's going to be a fascinating look 3 to 5 years from now. And it's going to be made up differently than it is today, for sure.
Yeah. Meaghan, there's so many things that I want to talk with you about, and it just means we're going to have you back, because I want to talk with you about ISVs and how to enable extended channels and how to tap into marketplaces. But we're going to have to bring you back again, because there's so much we can work on. I do, and I'm going to apologize up front and tell you that I'm going to subject you to our 5 questions. And so these are just 5 random questions. There's no right answer, but we are keeping score.
Okay, I'm ready.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear. All right, so let's get to our first question. Meaghan, what is more important to you, customer acquisition or customer retention?
Customer retention.
Why is that?
Because I think, once you have a customer, the customer experience and keeping them happy so they'll come back and buy again is extraordinarily important.
See, that is the right answer. Question 2. Speaking of your son, what is Ashton's favorite book?
Goodnight Moon.
That's a good book, but we were looking for The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I'm sorry.
Oh, shoot. I love that one. It bites all the way through the book. I remember that one fondly.
All right. Next question is, what's your go-to KPI?
My go-to KPI, well, that's a tough question. I have to say it's going to be pipeline and marketing influence pipeline for our organization.
Yeah. So you know what? We're going to have to talk about marketing influence in another time too. That's a great topic to dig into. Yep. All right. Question 4. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, it's got to be Taylor Swift. That one with all the words in it that you just think, God, what the hell is the name of that song? I don't know, but I'm really good at it, and it's exhausting by the end. It's just fantastic. Japan, you got to do it in Japan with the beer and the tambourines and the gold microphones, the whole setup.
That sounds great. Unfortunately, we were looking for Gangnam Style by Psy. So better luck next time. Last question. What is the best channel marketing advice you've ever received?
Best channel marketing advice I've ever received is focus on demand generation and pipeline and prove it with the numbers. Whatever money goes in, you got to prove what came out the other side.
Speaking of money coming in, there's a customer calling, which means it's probably time for us to go. So
I got to go get that call and get that customer acquired and retention. So
you see, you got your eye on the money. So Meaghan Sullivan, SAP, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been wonderful. We're going to have you back again soon.
I'll come back anytime, Larry. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. And thanks everyone for joining. Until next time, I'm Larry Walsh.
Thank you for joining Changing Channels with Larry Walsh, a production of Channelnomics. Our executive producer is Layla Kaiser, with the support of our production team at Modern Podcasting. If you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the like button, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and share with your friends. For more information about Channelnomics services and insights, follow us on Twitter and YouTube, and check out our website at channelnomics.com. Channelnomics is a registered trademark of, and Changing Channels is copyright by 2112 Enterprises, LLC.